Hello and welcome to the Hessian Scrum. Joining me today is Don from this fantastic brutal death metal band from Australia, Oni, who recently released a compilation under Sphere of Apparition Records from Australia. And it was really impressive brutal death metal. There was two demos. We have the review on the site compiled into one. So, thanks for joining us today, Don.
No worries, mate.
So, tell us, like, how did the band start? Australia has never been a place for brutal death metal.
Uh, I moved in and lived with the drummer Matt for some time. We were each in different bands. At the time, I was in Martyr. He was in Stargazer, I believe. And we just started jamming with a common interest in death metal, obviously. We both knew Paul, the bass player vocalist. Matt had been in a band with him previously, so we asked him to join. And we just wanted to make brutal death metal, obviously. And as you said, there wasn't a whole heap of that particular style at the time, so that's what we did.
Yeah. We recently interviewed another Australian band, Neuropath, who said that they were like the first brutal death metal band, and obviously, they were also Sphere of Apparition did their stuff. Like, did you know them or were you like aware of them at the time?
Yeah, I had the demos back 100 years ago, however long ago it was. And one of the guitarists actually joined Miscreation, who's one of my favorite Aussie bands. So I knew them through that link. Um, I guess most bands in Australia were quite incestuous back in the day because there was fuck all musicians who could pull that sort of thing off. So I'd never really had contact with Neuropaths per se, but some of the members in other bands.
Yeah. The big thing with Oni is like, so this is before everyone was obsessed with Japan. Like, obviously even the name, you actually had like real Japanese themes, real flutes and everything. And like, how that
Yep.
come with like these insane brutal death metal riffs?
I guess I might have been the main influence with that. Growing up, did lots of martial arts and loved, ninja movies, samurai movies. So it was a huge influence on me. And there was no bands doing it at the time. I guess slightly Nile had the Egyptian thing, but that's obviously not Japanese. So yeah, that's took a little bit of a hint from Nile, but did it our way. And I guess Japan's quite a close neighbor, Australasia. So a bit of an influence came from there.
Yeah. I mean, how'd you get the flutes into the studio and everything? Because I don't think it like was it MIDI or was it like real Japanese flutes and everything?
It was sampled from films and soundtracks and things like that. I guess nowadays we use MIDI guitars in my current band to do flutes and other instrumentation. But back then, that kind of thing wasn't available. So we did the old steal from wherever you can to make it happen.
I mean, it must have been quite tricky because especially on the second demo, where things get slightly more complicated, right? And like you've got a lot more of that kind of instrumentation. Like, how did like were you changing the guitar lines to fit the samples or how was it? How'd that
Uh,
work?
I think I just found things that fit. There was no particular rewriting. I think the only manipulation is I did some backwards um, manipulation on a computer before we chucked it on the demo. But yeah, nothing was written to the flutes or the gotos or anything like that. Back then, it was just luck that it sounded similar. Nowadays, we would specifically write parts and construct it the way that we need it. But back then, no such thing.
I mean, it's crazy. Seppuku Blade like sounds like as if, the guitars and the flutes were actually written for each other, especially the kind of like conclusion at the end of the song.
Yeah, no, I think it was just a happy accident. Just sort of forced it together. It was nothing written to each other, and I believe no, the start is basically the ending backwards, um, which you may or may not pick up. There's like the lead backwards with the riff into the start of the song. And I guess at the end, it's just pure luck that it matched.
Yeah, definitely. What what's interesting is like, I love a lot of brutal death metal, but most of the time it just feels like, standard wallpaper music. Like you can't tell, one brutal death metal band from another, but with this one, it actually has an identity.
I'd probably contribute that to there not being a whole lot of it when we started. And our influences were probably not straight brutal death metal, more like Hate Eternal, Morbid Angel, Deicide, Nile. Probably Matt and Paul had influences like Emperor and Zyklon and things like that. So kind of a different breed of brutal death metal. Whereas a lot of bands would have been influenced by Suffocation, Devourment, or the timing where we sort of started as well.
Mm.
Like the Devourment and the American brutal death metals, Disgorge and that was around that time. So I guess we weren't actually influenced, but had similar influences to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. You guys definitely did come and like, the last period where death metal was still kind of evolving, late 90s, early 2000s. And, I always felt that
Yeah,
things after that started to stagnate really badly.
yeah. I think there's always waves of really interesting bands. I guess the first wave of brutal death metal, every first wave is always the most interesting, most innovative. If you look at say the first or second wave of death metal, none of the bands sounded similar. Like you had your Deicide, your Obituaries, your Death, Possessed. I guess they'd be considered the first, but they're all quite different. And then those influences, I guess from thrash to death and then death to brutal death, is always the first lots of bands are always going to be different or always going to be original. And then I guess it just gets saturated, oversaturated.
Yeah, it is a shame. But yeah, but you guys had two demos and everything, like, and obviously, you played in bands after, you actually kept up with metal and everything. But why was there never an Oni full length? Because, compositionally and like playing wise, you were there.
I think I was doing too much because I had three full-time bands at the time and trying to work full-time and live life. One band had to go, and I think I decided at the time that Oni was the most hard work. Um, and I kind of like the fact that we ended on a high note without having too much out because it could have started to become stagnant or watered down. Um, there may or may not be some unreleased material, um, but it's neither here nor there. There is some stuff recorded.
Yeah. What I really liked about that is like even during the most like hectic and kind of fingers flying all over the fretboard parts, you guys still kept a sense of melody.
Yeah, that could be the other guitarist. I'm kind of meat and potatoes. Uh, Once I write something, it's written. I'll do some crazy leads, whatever. But the other guitarist at the time, Jason, he was more of a black metal guitarist, so he liked his melody. He and his other guitarist in his band did quite a lot of counter melodies to each other. And I guess the other three actually have a lot more influence in the black metal side, where there's lots more melody. For me, I just like writing brutal stuff, and the other guys would have chucked their 2 cents, which all four of us made the what it is. I guess if any one of us wrote it, it would be a lot more simple, one sided.
Yeah. So, I mean, were you guys like in the practice studio writing these songs and everything together?
Well, I guess Matt and I lived together, so we would jam every day. He would practice every day to keep up his chops. Back then, there was no techniques that you could learn off of YouTube, So he was bashing the skins to keep his chops up and get faster. Um, so I would write with him. I would usually write by myself. That's what I do still to this day. But always let the other musicians write their parts. So that's where other influences come in. So it's not just linear. It can be quite colorful when everyone gets to do their own thing. And I guess Paul and I wrote most of the songs, so we would show each other. I guess we didn't really have email back then to send. We would just show each other in the jam room. This is how it goes, whatever. This is a song I've come up with. But we'd all contribute to the arrangements. So if something didn't work the way I had written it or Paul had written it, we would rejig it all together. And I guess that's some of the magic, having different people work on your tunes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to like. I felt like a lot of those songs where, you guys would be playing with like a pair of really opposing, you know, ideas. Like for example, what was the song? Um, can't remember. It was Creature of Chaos. That's it. Where
Yep, yep.
you've got the really simple chugging riff, and then next to it, it just goes absolutely batshit crazy.
Yeah, it's good to have a variety, I think, and mashing it together, whether it works or it doesn't work, you soon find out either at a gig or in the jam room. Um, I find lots of brutal music is very linear, that it's all brutal. There's no fast to slow, slow to fast, mid pace. It's all just go, go, go. So having a bit of a chug and then some chaos works really well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Always felt like, brutal death metal should never be like this complacent, devourment slam fest, which is what these bands do for like 40 minutes at a time now.
Yeah, variety definitely helps any kind of genre, any kind of extreme music.
Yeah.
If you look at Morbid Angel, there's from album to album, it's well, not necessarily the last few, but the initial few were all quite different to each other, but it was still Morbid Angel. There's fast bits, there's slow bits, there's heavy bits,
Yeah,
sort of thrashy to the very death.
I completely agree. I, you know, one thing I think I felt a little bit out of place was the Slayer cover because, that's quite a, popular band with death metal people.
Yeah. Back in 2000, 2001, I can't remember the actual year. The record label Oracle, I think it was doing a series of cover albums, and they just asked if we wanted to jump on, and we all love Slayer, so we just said yes. Yeah, we never played it live. We never did covers.
Yeah, I can
As you said,
understand.
it wouldn't have fit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all love Slayer, but I just felt like that was something more for the bands that came in like the early 90s to cover, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It was just an opportunity that was offered to us, so we jumped on it like that. A little bit extra exposure at the time.
Um, and obviously sometimes the production gets a bit muddy. Like, how are you guys trying to record something so insane? Like, were you in a studio? Or was it like, were you tracking this at home?
No, we were in a studio. Back in the day, it was reel to reel, so there's no Pro Tools plugins or any, no chopping things all together. It was basically live with lead and vocal overdubs, maybe drop-ins on the guitars, but nothing the way modern recordings go. So it was a product of its time. There's a place called SAE, which is School of Audio Engineering. So we recorded there with average equipment, but I think it has its charm.
Oh, definitely, it does. But it's a shame, that a lot of the kind of the nuances kind of like just disappear a little bit at times.
Oh, definitely, yeah. But that's what demos are for,
Yeah.
to get where you're going. Um, the best demos often sounded like garbage and then had golden albums afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Have you ever heard the first Death demos?
Yeah, that like rehearsal room recordings. They're not necessarily studio albums.
No, but it does sound brutal, it's got a charm to it, like seeing like 16-year-old Chuck scream as hard as he can while playing sloppily.
Yeah, and back in the early 80s, you wouldn't have any kind of budget to get into a studio, and an engineer in a studio wouldn't have the foggiest idea how to record death metal.
I mean, it's always funny with like that earlier brutal death metal stuff because at least with death metal, you have Slayer, you have Metallica, you have a kind of background to it, but what you guys were playing was just such a big jump from death metal, as much as death metal was a jump from thrash metal. It must have been even more confusing for the engineer.
Well, luckily for us, the bass player from Stargazer, who knows death metal quite well, he was our engineer at the time. So I guess he did a great job. I love pretty much everything he's put his hands to recording wise. I'd hate to think what we would have been like if we went to a standard studio. I mean, when I took the stuff for mastering at the mastering studio, the guy had zero clue as to what to do. So he just made it CD ready. He didn't enhance anything.
Oh my
He
God.
just made levels like release levels. Whereas now you'd send it to someone and it would sound like boosts in the right spots to enhance things or drop things that need to be dropped, make the smooth bottom end, more clarity in the top end kind of thing.
Yeah.
Back then, who knows what death metal is?
It's a shame because what I really appreciated the most, talking purely from the point of view of the compilation is just uh for a brutal death metal band, some of those melodies I can't think of anywhere I've ever heard something like that. Like Herald to Hell on Earth. It just stood out. I was like, there's no other band doing that kind of stuff.
No, I guess it's just a mix of all of our influences that created that. I'm pretty sure I sat down and I was watching a movie and I wrote most of that, brought it to the guys, and everyone just put their magic on it. I believe there's a section where Paul's doing some guttural vocals and Jason does like a counter to what I'm doing, and it makes it really creepy, like a really creepy melody. So I'm guessing that's probably what you're picking up on.
Yeah, singing. And also in terms of thematic influences, I picked up there is definitely a Miyamoto Musashi influence in some of the lyrics and everything.
Oh, definitely. The Book of Five Rings, Sun
Oh,
Tzu, The Art of War. That's what I went on to do my next band. Lots of Japanese texts, but also lots of folklore, which isn't widely known. And back then there was fuck all on the internet to find. So old textbooks we'd get our information from,
oops.
and even down to the band name. Oni is like a demon. But if you look in Chinese culture, it's actually a ghost, the same name. So it has multi meanings.
Yeah, I mean, you can't compare like Japanese demonology to a kind of like Judeo-Christian base and understanding of evil. Like it's so different.
Oh, definitely, and that's probably what was intriguing and why it worked. Because there's 100 bands doing anti-Christian this, anti-Christian that. Let's give you something else to give you a nightmare. Some of the Japanese horror movies are some of the most twisted, scary things you can watch.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what are some Japanese horror movies that you like?
Oh, so like you've got The Ring and you've got The Grudge or Ju-on. That those ones are far better than the American remakes. They actually just have uh, a weird supernatural feel to them rather than jump scares, which American horror generally has. There's a whole series that are Lone Wolf and Cub, which is not horror, but it's action, but full of gore, which could be considered horror. Those kind of things were very influential back then.
No. Y- Yeah, because I forgot like the Ring and the Grudge are so old because I've got the American version in mind of like both those films. So I was like, yeah. But it's really weird that, nowadays a lot of bands have the Japanese thing that comes through, but it's done this really kind of anime, manga, what they call it, the shonen stuff, for kids and all that. And I've just found that always cringe and like very westernized.
Yeah, I guess it's because it's modern pop culture they're trying to incorporate. But that was, I guess, back when we were starting, you maybe had Akira, which was a kind of post-apocalyptic sci-fi manga. There's probably other ones, but that's the only one that was really on my radar. Or the Ninja Scroll, which was fucking brutal as well
Oh
for a
yeah,
cartoon.
yeah, with the snake coming out of the girl's private
Yeah,
parts.
which you're not going to get in a pop manga, I'm sure.
Yeah.
There'll more be hentai or whatever they call it nowadays.
Exactly. I mean, Akira's great. I've never considered that anime because it was just a little bit more adult than what a lot of these animes or manga are trying to do.
Yeah, I guess different target audience. And early on, I guess westernized cartoons, the early ones were quite brutal and adult-esque, whereas now they're all just light and fluffy for kids and PC culture.
I mean, yeah, Dragon Ball has got nothing to do with, 1986 Dragon Ball nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you envisage dragons, to me, it's nothing to do with little fucking balls and playing games.
Exactly. But yeah, but I've always loved, the Book of Five Rings, and I've always found that like fascinating that, it kind of creeps in, to stuff that you were doing there. It's just, but it's weird, like that aesthetic has never broken out in the metal where I've always found it really interesting, the lone samurai who has no master, who just goes around fighting a bunch of random people.
Yeah, the Ronin, that's basically what the Lone Wolf and Cub is. There was a compilation movie that they created called Shogun Assassin, which was like a English overdubbed, maybe all the most brutal parts of the series of Lone Wolf and Cub movies into one movie. So if you ever get a chance to watch that, that's very big influence on both Oni and Sun Tzu because it's just fucking over the top gore in a samurai movie with a samurai looking after his kid.
That's quite funny. So now the big question, sub or dub?
I prefer reading and listening to the original dialogue because you lose a lot when but a dubbed voiceover, especially an English or American accent, generally trying to be Japanese, is like, nah, sorry, mate, you've missed the point altogether.
Oh yeah, definitely. I don't think it works particularly well as well. You gotta have to give it that kind of effort.
Yeah, yeah,
But, you know, so going back to incantation superstition, what's really interesting is that there's a certain kind of like ADHD quality to it, in like how things quickly change throughout.
yep,
But what hold it, but there's still an overall cohesion. Whereas nowadays with a lot of metal bands, I feel like it's either, you get one idea from, from start to finish, or you get 20 ideas that make no sense, and it just feels like, hey, I just recorded all this stuff on my PC.
yep. I guess we had laser focus on what we wanted as a stylistic conglomeration. I like chaos, so that's where the ADHD might come in. Not that I am ADHD, not that there's anything wrong with people that have that, but I like music that moves. I don't like it to be linear and boring, especially if I have to play it over and over again. So that our influences definitely were on our, not necessarily on our sleeves, but we like interesting things, so we tried to make something interesting.
Completely agree. So I had the chance to listen to, was it The Forbidden City by Sun Tzu?
Yes, yep,
Really cool. But in many ways, I felt like there's a lot of Oni, the spirit of Oni kind of lives on through a lot of that Sun Tzu stuff.
well, it's me writing it, so of course it's gonna come across. And the two songs after that are actually Oni songs. Sorry, one of them, the Kamiso one, was actually one of the songs that we never completed. Um, I just, it's a heavier version, so it's tuned down quite a lot from what Oni was, and I like it. It's kind of darker. Um, I guess from Oni, you got Your Mortal Dreams, and you got Sun Tzu, and we sort of split style wise. I think Beyond Mortal Dreams kept the brutality, whereas I went heavier and darker, I thought, in Sun Tzu. Um, yeah, that's, I guess, I don't know if that's answered what you were
Yeah, no, no, I
asking.
definitely see that because like I said, that's what really interested me with Oni, because anyone can blast at whatever 300 BPM nowadays, or whatever the hell it is, and just go, play stupid, kind of stuff. But it's all
Yep.
about having a real melody and a real identity, and each song having like actual defining moments.
Yeah. Yeah. 300 BPM. I don't think we were anywhere near that back in the day. We, I guess, we on the ladder stuff we might have had triggers, but I think back then we just struggled with acoustic kicks and acoustic snare. That's just the way it was, I guess. It wasn't a common thing to have triggers back in the day. It's definitely helps now because everyone's playing fuckloads faster.
Yeah, and it keeps the, it makes it easier when you're playing guitars to it. Like you just hear the kick go through and everything. It's
Yeah, as long as I can hear the kick and the snare, I don't care about the rest of the kit. Like live, especially. In the rehearsal room, you don't necessarily have the triggers cranked up because it's not as loud as when you're playing on a stage. But it's definitely helpful. Um, like my current drummer, his feet are super quick. So the triggers help define it. So it's not just a rumble with the acoustic bass drum, you get some clarity through the PA.
yeah, definitely. So what are your thoughts on like current metal, brutal death metal and everything?
I dig some of it. A lot of it's just same old, like it's just regurgitating itself. There's always standouts. One of the brutal bands from Australia, which I really dig, is Disentombed. I think they have a bit of a difference because they have some doomy slam bits rather than just slam all the whole time, and then they have their super tech, super fast stuff. Um, yeah, I dig the genre, but it gets very samey and very boring.
Oh, definitely. I, you know, I that's why I'd rather, go back through the 90s and early 2000s than like, listen to a lot of these modern bands.
Yeah, there's always going to be standouts in every wave, every genre, but it gets harder and harder because there's thousands and thousands more bands come out every year. Maybe not thousands, but you know what I mean. There's
Yeah,
always
I
stacks.
think there are thousands. I think I saw on Metal Archives they're adding like, how many thousand a year, and that's just bands who have at least released an EP or a demo. You know what I mean? It's not people rehearsing or anything. So
Yeah,
metal has
and I
become a bit too
don't even
big.
know. Yeah, I don't even know if it's they have to do physical releases anymore
No, it's
because
it's
most people
digital
just
now.
do digital releases. Yeah,
So yeah, so there are too many bands. But it is what it is, and we're happy that we have bands like Oni to listen to.
yeah. I mean, thank you. There's stacks like you say Incantation or Immolation releases an album. You know it's going to be great. Well, not always, but those two bands in particular have released pretty good quality albums consistently. Whereas if you compare, say, Morbid Angel, they fell off the cliff and then tried to come back.
And Illud is a timeless classic.
There's maybe half a good song on it. And I don't even think it was written by any of the original members.
No. Yeah, I think it was the other guy, Destruct Thor, who actually wrote all the death metal songs on that one.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. When they toured Australia, I think around 2009, 2010, the opening band was actually just Trey's techno stuff, which was fucking atrocious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's another story for a completely different time.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I agree.
Because we could just go on about, some of the lyrics and everything. It's just too much.
Yeah, no thanks.
All right. I think we've done just about everything. Any closing statements?
Oh, thanks heaps for the interest. I'd say check out all of our bands posts only if you have time or an interest. Paul's Beyond Mortal Dreams is quite good. He also does Oath of Damnation, which is kind of symphonic death black metal, where he's doing bass vocals. Yeah, thanks heaps for reaching out. I think Jason gave you our details to
Yeah, you did.
shoot through a interview. So it's my first one. So thanks for popping my cherry.
No, no worries. All right. Well, thank you very much, Don. Have a good
Yeah,
day.
no worries. Thanks, mate. Cheers.